So, if you would, for our audience, what is your background and how did you get involved in amateur radio?
Hi. Well, it's good to be here, and thanks for the question. Okay, so I'm really a computer scientist. That's my essential training. I have various degrees in that, but I also sort of a side part of being a computer scientist. I'm also a computer engineer, and so some of my degrees are in engineering as well as computer science. So my PhD is from the engineering school of the University of Pennsylvania, but it's in computer science. so, so anyway, that's my background. I often worked as a computer scientist. I've also worked as a computer science professor. I've worked as an engineering professor. But my very first job out of my undergraduate days at Penn State University as a computer science major, I was fortunate enough to get a job at the David Sarnoff Research Center. This was RCA's premier research location. They had research locations all around the place, including in Camden and other states, even in some other countries. But the premier location was the David Sarnoff Research Center. And I had the opportunity to work there on a home computer project, on some speech recognition work, a whole bunch of different things. But the great thing about the RCA location there, and actually all the RCA locations, from what I recall, is that they were very proactive with regard to ham radio. And and in fact, many commercial broadcast companies like ABC in New York, they actually have a regular VE testing right there in the ABC studios in New York, where you can take your exam. But it was really an important thing for RCA that there be trained radio operators in case of emergencies. There was a strike at one point with RCA employees. Not being able to staff the stations. And so they really made it easier for us to get our ham radio licenses. We would have meetings, at the labs and many of the other places as well. And you could study for your license. And they actually did the testing there. It was in the early days of the individual testing, where you didn't have to go to an FCC site, but somebody could give you your test there. And that was how I got my first license. I did have to learn Morse code at the time. That was required for your novice license. And so that was how I got my start. But really, it sort of started earlier than that. My father is a science teacher in the Philadelphia school district. And so he would always be bringing stuff home. So I don't know where he got this stuff and why he was showing it to his students, but he brought home Morse code keys and stuff from NASA, because it was like the 60s. And, so he would bring all that stuff home. And my brother really was the one who was more interested in radio than I. But I was the one who first got licensed, because we both didn't have the opportunity to study for it until we were adults. So anyway, that's sort of how I got started. And, to this day, my family is still very much involved with science, and my sister's a NASA space ambassador, and my brother's an engineer. So, that's basically how I got started. I guess you could say it was in the genes.
Okay, thank you. How did the Moore Project, which is what we're here to find out about, get started, and what organizations are involved?
Okay, so I was looking through your list of talks, and you had Rosie was in from ARDC, and that is the group, excuse me, that actually funded the Moore Project. And I heard sort of through the grapevine, somebody called me and said, there's this money and they're giving out these grants. So why don't you apply for one? And, I was like, well, what would I do? So it was pretty interesting. They had a wide range of amounts that you could request. So, not being one to undercut us short with any funds, I asked for the maximum amount that they had, and basically outlined this project that you'll hear more about as we go along. But I outlined this project. It was a lot of effort because they can only give the funds to nonprofits. But I happen to be very involved with the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. And so, knowing that they're a nonprofit and having been an officer in the Princeton Central Jersey section of the IEEE, I asked some of my colleagues there if they would allow the Moore project to fit underneath as a part of the IEEE. But not only that, the current chair, the guy who's actually in charge of the Princeton Central Jersey section right now, Deepak Kataria, he sent me back an email and said, well, we'll give you some people, some of our officers to help out. And so we were not just under the IEEE or the IEEE Princeton Central Jersey section, we were under the BT, the Broadcast Technology chapter. And so the chair of the chapter and also another ham, there's a lot of hams in the IEEE, of course, as you might imagine. And so they basically started to be the advisory team, and we had to navigate through all sorts of legal shenanigans at IEEE headquarters in New York to make sure that all the paperwork was all filled out and signed. So it took a good, I would say, 7 or 8 months from the time that I heard about the project to it getting the funds and putting the funds in place. ARDC, I don't know, I didn't actually get to watch the video that you had of Rosie, but they wound up with this huge amount of money because, in large part, because in the early days of the internet, they were selling blocks of IP addresses, which were not tremendously valuable, and who thought it would be important? And they were selling these blocks of IP addresses for relatively small amounts of money. So this group got together in Silicon Valley and said, well, we'll just create this nonprofit group and we'll, use these IP addresses for amateur radio use. So they had way more IP addresses than they could ever possibly need. And so not too long ago, when they were extraordinarily valuable, my understanding is that they sold them off. I have no idea how much money they got for them, but it was enough to really create this amazing resource where they're providing funds for all sorts of different amateur radio projects. They support the ARRL and other groups as well. So that's how we got started. So it was between the ARDC, the IEEE, and we also have the David Sarnoff Radio Club, which I'm still a member, although it's no longer at RCA because RCA is sort of no longer. But basically, we meet, or when before COVID, we meet at the Princeton Red Cross, and they allowed me the use of the website. So that's where the more projects, all of the web materials and all the training materials and everything is there, and it's hosted on the site. So that's been fantastic. We zoomed up to, if you type in More Radio Project, we are #1 on the first page of the Google search. So that basically, it's been catching on, and that's how it got started. And those are the organizations.
Okay, interesting. What are the goals of the Moore project?
Okay, so for this proposal, which you can find, excuse me, on the Moore Project website, the proposal, I decided that it was an important thing to try to train as many new techs as we could possibly train in a 2-year period. They had 1-year projects or 2-year projects, so I applied for a 2-year project, and in my wildest fantasies, I thought that we might be able to train 500 new, train and license 500 new tech hams within that 2-year period. And so that was the basic goal, but there were sub goals as well. One basically being the whole idea of, what the name that I came up with was, make operating radio easier. And we find that with a lot of hams who get licensed, they're enthusiastic about it. They take the exam, maybe they're an engineer, so it's not so hard for them. Maybe they study for it, but then for whatever reason, they never get on the air. They don't find an Elmer. They don't get involved with the club. And so there is really a lot of surveys that have been showing that if you do not get on the air. I mean, licenses are now 10 years in length, but a lot of people just let them expire because if you once you get on the air and you have a feeling for the hobby and start to find out all the other interesting things you can do, even without getting on the air, but that really is an important way of having retention in the hobby. And so basically the idea was not just to make taking the test easier, but also to make the operations of the radio easier. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we talk.
Okay. So why is the emphasis on youth and non-males in the project?
Okay, again, I had to really justify what I was trying to do here. And right now we are accepting people of all ages, 12 and up, and of all genders. But what we find is that for a whole variety of reasons, youth are not getting involved as they were, in the past. But even still, when you get on the air, you really, you hardly hear any high-pitched voices like mine, and the high-pitched voices are often confused as a kid, so I've been referred to as a kid or YL. But it's just not that much in the hobby. And that's a shame, because I think that especially for youth, and by youth we're defining that as age 12 to 18, but for youth it really can turn into a career. And learning about all this electrical stuff, messing around with the equipment, getting on the air, finding out about radio and electronics and all sorts of things, it really does lead to careers. I'm sure most of you have heard of Joe Taylor. He's, the famous Nobel laureate physicist, but he credits, I went to some of his talks, and he credits having gotten started in physics by getting his amateur radio license when he was a teenager. And he also credits even his Nobel Prize, the discovery of the binary pulsars, to his radio experiences, because the binary pulsars, they make a particular sound. Like when you're listening to the sound of the universe, they're really listening to it. And they were hearing, him and the other co-awardee, they heard this sound that he realized, wow, that sounds like a Doppler effect. And so, well, how could it be a Doppler? And they basically figured out that there were these binary pulsars, and that's how this sound, whatever, signal was really emanating from that location. And so that's one of the great things about getting involved with it as a youth. One of the problems is that for a long time in the United States, the Boy Scouts were just the Boy Scouts. The biggest event for amateur radio for youth is the Boy Scout Jamboree, but they would not allow any girls. Over in Europe, they actually have a jamboree where all people, males and females, are invited, and all youth can be involved in it. And they have all sorts of scouts that are involved in their jamboree, and it is about, almost even, I think, almost 50-50 of youth in males and non-males. And so with regard to our group, what we find is that if you cut off the feeder, the youth from it, then you're going to be behind. And I was researching, when I was writing the proposal, I was researching this using, various journals, other types of writings, and found a number of studies going back decades saying that there was only about 15% women who were getting involved with amateur radio. And that's awful. And there are so many different and exciting things going on with STEM education for girls. And even in audio engineering, I'm also an audio engineer. I got involved with that when I was at RCA as well. And in audio engineering, there's a special group called what is it called? Yeah, wait a second. Sound girls. There's also STEM girls also, but there's sound girls in the Audio Engineering Society. And it's just a group of girls, women. There are great, fantastic audio engineers who are female. The woman who has been running Skywalker Sound for decades now, woman engineer. So, but you don't hear about them too much. So anyway, that was my hope, was to increase this population. So you'll have a lot more high pitched voices on the air and also have more women involved. Another thing that I also found in surveying the literature was that looking at, even just the covers of the ARL magazines, and sad to say, also they started to change them recently, even the training manuals, it's just guys on the cover. And I'm old enough to remember, remember the erector set? It was like this pieces of weird metal that you would bolt together with screws, and you would create these sort of high-rise condominiums and out of the little metal things. But it was always boys on the package of that, and even on the chemistry sets. If you remember these old ones, they finally started to change that. But women have always been involved in these fields. But it's been a battle, and it's been like, no, that's not a girl's thing to do. So sadly, I have actually, in trying to promote the More Project, I have had problems with Girl Scout leaders who have even said to me, no, I don't think our girls would be interested in that. To which I try to politely reply, have you asked them? So anyway, that's the reason. I think there's a lot, we have to overcome this. It's starting, and I think everybody should be involved in amateur radio. I think it's, shouldn't be a gender based thing. So that's what I feel, and I always wanted to promote it, especially to youth and to to girls, women, that sort of thing. So that's basically what I've been trying to do. When I would be at ham radio meetings, sometimes, many times, I was the only female in the room. So, so it's changing. It's starting to change, and I'm hoping that the More Project will help to change that.
I know some of the makerspace meetings that I've been to, some of the girls there are brilliant.
They are, yes, they are really brilliant. The girls are really fantastic in that, and all the and Lady Ada of Ada Fruit, who does a lot of maker stuff, and also is a ham radio licensee herself. She's very interested in it, and she was a ham as a youth, and then let it lapse, and then relicensed. So yeah, there's a lot of women who are finding their way back to amateur radio. We need more. So, more, that's what we're saying. So it's more in many different ways.
What are the roles of people in the More Project, and who can join the project?
Okay, so the way it works is that we started out with just the director, essentially me, and then the initial advisory committee, which were the IEEE people that were working with me. But in my proposal, I wanted to create an initial advisory team, excuse me, of about 25 people. That was my goal, to find VEs, people who have their volunteer examiner certificates or are willing to get them, that could be willing to serve as the volunteer examiners when we get to the testing part, but that I would also be able to count on them as our trainers. But they're all part of the advisory team. And so we have a monthly meeting. There's usually about, as I say, 25 people are on the list, but and more can always join. So there's no real requirements to being in the advisory team. But in order to be a VE, obviously you have to have your general class license. So that's sort of the main hurdle. And so we've sort of made having your VE being also the requirement for being a trainer. We figure that it's, if you're willing to go through that and try to understand those rules and do some testing and stuff like that, that you probably have, the interest in it enough to be a trainer. So the trainers, one of the trainers we have right now has only been a ham for 1 year, but he got very excited about it, got his license and worked all the way up to extra, and then got his VE and joined the group. So that's basically what the roles are. And then the main role is the students. So the students are going to be the 500 people, hopefully, that we get by the end of this course. And those are the different roles that we have. And essentially, pretty much anybody can join the project if you have, let's say you have a group. It could even be a STEM group, it could be mixed of boys and girls or whatever. So you're the teacher of a STEM group, but you're not an amateur radio operator, and you don't really know any people who can do that. But you'd like to have your STEM group learn about amateur radio. Well, they can join the More Project. So we're really looking forward to people, hearing from people who have groups, so that way we don't have to go hunting and pecking for different people. But basically, if people have a group, and our classes, we try to keep them around in the 10 to 15 person range. We can go a little bit above. We don't want to make the groups too large, but we can work with you if you have a larger group. So we're looking for groups, but right now we have people contacting us from all over the world, because there was a blog on which the call for participation went out, and it was in Chinese, believe it or not. And so the person who did the blog is she's American, but she was from China, and she is an amateur radio operator. So she sent this in Chinese. So we were getting all these messages back, which she had to translate for me. And China is very big on, they have contests and all sorts of things. They give you awards, and they're very big on using learning about amateur radio. So quite a few people contacted us from that group, but we had to sadly say to some of them, since they were not in this country, we're really only licensing US radio amateurs. So you have to be a US radio amateur, you have to have a US address. I don't think you necessarily have to be in the country, but you have to have a US address, because that's what's needed in order to get your FRN. So that's essentially who can join the project. So pretty much anybody, and it's ages 12 and up, and we do have a 12-year-old, and we have a 97-year-old, believe it or not, who are in our training classes already. So it's quite good. And we do have one Canadian who's working on her Canadian license, but she's sitting in as sort of an auditor in the More Project. And so we're letting people sort of sit in, but in order to really be in the project, it's basically US focused.
Okay. How do students sign up?
Oh, okay, great. So the way that the students sign up is, you go onto our website, which is n2re.org / and then more, spelled out sort of with hyphens in it. So basically, so anyway, you can look for that. I think you guys have that on your website. So, or maybe I'll type it into the chat. But basically, More Project in the name, and that it's M-O-R-E- project. And if you go to that website, there's a 2-step process, but I'm also giving you guys some flyers that you can post on your website. It's just a simple 2-step process. So that's for students. So if you want to be a student, you have to we give you the link to go to the FCC website to get your FRN. We were originally concerned about, would be having people's addresses and maintaining all this information. And then we realized that now that the FCC requires the FRN in order to take the exam, we figured that would be a way to qualify them. If they were willing to type all their information in and get their FRN, and all they have to do is send me their FRN number, then they can be in the class. So it made it way easier. So that's the first step. And for other people who want to be volunteers, and also for the people, once they send their FRN, we have a few electronic forms that they fill out that gives us some demographics, sort of tells us where they're located, because that's going to help us figure out how to do the testing and also get them on the air and stuff like that. So basically there's a few forms that you fill out, and then you're in. That's basically it. Now for the people who have groups, if they want to be a part of it also, they should get their FRN and be a part of, the training. So and groups can be of any age. A lot of senior citizens homes that have amateur radio ham shacks and stuff like that. So we're not really limiting it. It's, we still have this focus of trying to encourage youth and and people who are not male, but otherwise it's not discriminatory. Other people can also join as well.
Okay. So what would you ask our audience to help with your project?
Okay, so go onto the website and you can download some of our flyers and materials, but also on your website, you'll have the flyers. So there's one flyer that's just a more splashy one with a picture of Susan Helms, and I have a picture of Lady Ada too, I think. So a picture of Susan Helms on the ISS. I actually got to speak to her on the ISS. That was a contact that I actually made when she was on the International Space Station and talking on amateur radio. So, so there's that flyer, which is sort of more like the type of thing that you could post at a library or, on a bulletin board at a school. And then the other flyer, you can email these or hand them out or things like that. And that's the one that flyer tells you exactly what to do. Go to the FRN, get your FRN number, send it to me, and then that's basically how you sign up. So that's it. And it turned out to be a very easy process to get people to sign up. And what we find out, what we find is that, and I'm hoping that this talk will be an impetus of this as well, is that whenever we do some publicity, then we get a flurry of people who come in, and then we use their forms that they send us to figure out what the general availability is of that group of people, and then try to assign them to a particular time. So that's basically how it works. And then everything else, we explain everything as you go along, where to download the materials, and all the other stuff that's going to happen.
Okay. So how does the Moore project differ from other technician license courses?
Okay, so it is different. One of the things, excuse me, let me drink some tea. One of the things that many hams do is they take a ham cram and exam type of thing. In fact, the David Sonoff Radio Club has been doing that at the Trenton Computer Festival for many years. So it's an all Saturday thing. You come in the morning, we run you through all the materials, and then start going through some of the questions, and then people take the exam in the afternoon. But again, the problem with that is at the end of it, your brain's sort of fried, and okay, you got your license, but now what do you do with it? So it's not, it's great. I think it's great if if you can absorb all that material, or if you are an engineer, you've got to learn all those rules and regs. That's the sections that people usually fail on. Even Lady Ada got a few questions wrong when she was, when she was taking the technician exam license. So it's, you could get through most of it sort of brute force, but it doesn't really help you learn how to operate a radio. And so the great thing about this course is that we're really always emphasizing operating radios, and parts of this is the get on the air aspects of it. So with the really generous grant that we were able to get, we are able to provide every single person who licenses will receive, let's see if you can see it, they will receive one of, we have a couple of different varieties of Yaesu HTs. They're dual band, and this will get them on the air. They will actually have a radio that we will issue to them that is theirs, and get them on the air. And so that's part of it. Another aspect is we're doing things with software defined radio. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but these little dongles that you can buy, again, we provide all that. We provide a long wire antenna that they can connect up to that. And what I found, I mean, I got really fascinated about, it was about 7 or 8 years ago, with software defined radio, because for me, you hear about all these terms like sidebands and like lower sideband, upper sideband, but when you actually see that in the waterfall, and you see a signal that's got these bumps in it, and you can click on the upper sideband and the lower sideband or the center frequency, and you can actually see what it looks like, and then you see it in the waterfall, what's actually going on with that signal. That, to me, I mean, that just really changed things for me. I mean, I am fluent in all this stuff, but visually seeing it, many people are visual learners, and I think I am. And it just, to me, seeing those signals and being able to see the whole band, here's the band, I can pick out all these different channels. And so that's why we decided to put in software defined radio as a component of that, because when you've got your big radio, okay, so you graduate from this radio, you're going to want to buy your own, nice radio. You still have to figure out all that stuff about, well, which ones are lower sideband and which ones are upper sideband and all that stuff. And practicing with that on the software defined radio helps you understand that terminology, helps you understand, where you are, why you have to stay away from the ends of the bands, because you transmit there, you're going to be out of the band and stuff like that. So this is the type of thing that I think that having those get on the air experiences, and also seeing us demonstrate that type of thing. So one of the demonstrations we did, so that for the first course, it was me and two other guys from the David Sarnoff Radio Club, and we're positioned, I guess, about, I'm like in the middle, and one's about 20 miles away from me, and the other one's like 50 miles away from me. But we're all able to, with various radios, hit the David Sarnoff radio antenna's repeater, and which is located atop the supposedly tallest structure in New Jersey, which is this gigantic tower that's sort of a little bit outside of Trenton, a little south of Princeton. So that's where the club has our repeater. And so we did a three-way conversation, a demonstration for the class, showing, the map, showing, where the repeater was. And then they could hear us each talking through the repeater, and provide that as a demonstration. So that's the type of demonstration we do as part of each of the classes, to help them understand, you're not just memorizing this gobbledygook. It all has some reason when you start to get to using your radio, and you'll understand it when you get into it. So that's really why we think it's different from other technician licensing courses, especially because, not too many give the people a free radio. So I think that, that was good.
Okay. So what are the aspects that make operating radio easier? What are the aspects that make operating radio easier for the students?
Well, and I think that's really, all of this, everything that I just said. Once you get that feeling, like you understand, you've seen those frequencies, I wish I had seen them, they didn't have software defined radio back then. I mean, you could tune these things in on a scope, but, it's, to me, being able to really see it, and then actually have your hands on a radio. This is yours, and you can program it. We give them the cable that goes along with it, and it's not a Baofeng, so it's a little bit more commercially respectable. And you can connect it to your computer. We'll give them a file with frequencies in their area, so that way they can get on the air with it. But we also teach them how to manually program it. They can do simplex. So we've got some husband wife teams that are already in the class, and they're each going to get a radio, so they can yell at each other in their respective parts of the house. So different things like that. So that's what I think is going to make it easier, because we're really getting them on the air. And I'm not saying that other groups don't do that. A lot of times, if a training group is affiliated with a club, then they provide Elmers and help the people along with that. And then one of the other great things we also have is field day, where everybody comes out, and that's where you really do get your hands on it. But and yes, people can do field day with a control operator hovering over their shoulder, but when you're really doing it yourself, that's really the main thing. So I think that just having those hands-on experiences at the outset is, I'm hoping, and studies have also shown will encourage people to stay in the field.
Yes, hands-on makes all the difference in the world.
Totally. I'm glad you agree. Yes, it totally does. It totally does.
So once you got your funding, what initial tasks did you need to get done, get accomplished?
Okay, so it's been a long haul. Unfortunately, I mean, this was started, the application was started at the end of last year. And then, we all thought, well, there'd be vaccines and we would get rid of COVID and it would be easy. So, no, it turned out not to be. So we had to sort of pivot. And the initial tasks wound up being creating that advisory committee, which I had always planned on doing, and then basically using crowdsourcing from the members of the committee with the bribe of giving them radios, because we also wanted to test the radios that we were going to get. So any of the people in our committee, in our team, the More Project team, as we call them, any of them that volunteered to help us with slide sets, we would be able to give them a radio. So that was their bribe. And so we examined a whole bunch of different lecture slides. A lot of people have lecture slide sets, but a lot of them were not, they were really designed for the ham cramming exam. And they just covered, certain fundamental things and boom, boom, boom. So Alan Wolke, who's very involved with ARRL and is, up in North Jersey, he had a really great set of slides that we could use for the technical training. But unfortunately, most of the pictures that he had in there of examples of operators, you know what I'm going to say, was just nails. So I've had to pick through them. Plus, there were certain other things that I wanted to adapt to, to the slide set. But basically, wound up with the creating these slide sets as 5 separate slide sets, each following, because Alan Wolke, he had followed the no nonsense, the Dan Romanchik, his no nonsense tech. I guess it's a booklet that you can download for free as a PDF. He's hoping that if you want to go on in getting your other licenses, that you'll pay for his other books, which you probably should do. So he organized the different questions in a particular way that groups them by subject, which if you look at the FCC license question set, it's a pool for the text. It's 424 questions, and that pool is roughly organized. I mean, in the set, it just goes straight through, but it's roughly organized into these different groups, sort of like Ohm's law and the math section and stuff like that, electrical hazards and things, antennas. So Dan came up with this way of focusing on these different topics, and Alan used Dan's sequence to create this sequence of the slide set. So it was perfect. It was like the match made in heaven. So we had Dan's book, which we could get for free because it's a free download, and we had Alan's slides. But what we didn't have was, what we wanted to do was sort of a flip book of slides. So we created, and that was what we crowdsourced. We had our team take each of those slides, put the text in for them, the 4 possible answers, the distractors. The book only gives just the correct answers. It doesn't give the distractors. And I know myself, I like to see the distractors, because some of the distractors are very close to the right answer, and so you don't want to be fooled. So we created these slide sets. There's dozens of them that we use in the class, and that those are the slide sets that they can use to study for the exam. We encourage them to every night, so they just get a certain group of them each week, and that every night they should be going through and practicing them. So you can buy those flip decks and things like that, but we figured we would just create it ourselves because it's all in the public domain. So anyway, so yeah, that was basically those were our initial tasks. So that took us quite some time. So
And what challenges did you encounter in getting the first course started?
well, the pandemic. So we really did have to pivot because the Red Cross buildings were not available to us. Most schools, even to this day, will not allow us to be on site. So all the places where we would, museums were still closed. So all the places where we ordinarily would have tested were not allowing us to do testing. So that was really tough. And then figuring out, and we're still figuring out because we haven't run any VE tests yet. That will be happening later this month, our first VE testing, to figure out, because we pivoted to online, we could open it up to everyone. And so we've got people in California, Tennessee, Washington State, you name it. So people are coming in, zooming in from everywhere, and how to figure out how to get them tested and get them connected with testing. So those are the challenges that we really encountered. But everybody had challenges in the pandemic, but I think we were able to overcome them. Well, we'll see. Once we, and the same thing with GOTA, we won't be able to do that in person, so we've had to shift that as well. But maybe we'll be able to find people who can get together, with clubs and things like that.
There are lots of places that do online testing. Maybe you need to look into one of them.
Absolutely, we have. Yes, and we with ARL they do it, and then there's GLARG, and then there's the Hawaii group. So we are looking into all of that, and in fact, our next more team meeting will be deciding how we're going to do that, or maybe it'll be all, some of the above, So we'll offer that out as different possibilities. But we want to make sure that we connect the students up
Right.
with tasks.
And what challenges do you anticipate as the project goes along?
Well, here's the worst one, is that the question pool is going to change. So it expires in June. So, oh my goodness. So I know that it doesn't completely change, but there may be some changes. And of course, Dan's going to have to update all of his books, and the pool will come out approximately 3 months, I understand, before the first tests, will be required to be from the new pool, which I believe is July 1st. So we're probably going to have a hiatus, because we don't want to be training people up to the deadline and then that test expires. So we'll probably finish training our last, courses, maybe at the end of May, so that way they have at least a chance to take the test and a makeup if they can't pass it. And by the way, the Moore project also, one of the things that is different is that we pay for everything. So we pay for the testing, we pay for the licensing. So all of that is, is paid for by the Moore project. So that's been pretty good. But anyway, yeah, so we're going to have to gear up those Q&A slides, make sure that everything is still in sync. So probably we'll take the month of June and not give any classes then, and give ourselves a break to revise the slide sets. Someone's asking, what is the name of Dan's books? It is called the No Nonsense Technician License Manual, I think. But if you just type in No Nonsense, or go to our resource page on our website, and there's a link for it there. So oh, there's Dan. Hey, Dan. Okay, here it is. He's got it. The No Nonsense Amateur Radio License Study Guide. That's the full name. And he's given you the exact link. So go right there and start looking for his manuals. But it's very nice of him to provide the initial one for free, and I hope that people will continue to support him.
Okay, so where and how are your classes being held?
Oh, so basically, because we had to pivot, the classes are right now being all held on Zoom. So we're just doing it in Zoom, and people seem to be okay with it. We want them to be visible so that we can actually see them, and and hear them. And when we do the Q and A's, we do like 3 questions at a time per student, so that way it goes a little faster. And so each student, we call their name and then they answer the next 3 questions, and so it goes pretty fast. And that's the idea. So it's all being held virtually in Zoom right now. I mean, we would like to be back in person. We are not committed to staying in Zoom, but I think it also gave us the benefit of being able to train people from, all over the country, which we had originally just planned on starting in Eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Metro New York. So it was like, okay, whatever. So that's how it's being held right now.
Okay. Has COVID caused any particular challenge?
Yeah, I think, sort of as I mentioned, the fact that we've had to pivot, and I think it's, it is, people get that burnout, people are doing a lot of Zooms, maybe a little bit less now, and you get sort of a Zoom burnout. But our students have been very attentive. They're there and they're like paying attention, and they also take the no nonsense book, print it out, and then we see them scribbling in on the pages, and that's great. So I think, I think it's okay. I mean, we had to do that change, but I think it's okay. I mean, I'm hoping that we will have, go to experiences and things like that that will be able to be on site, various locations, and that would be our goal. And once the person has license, we'll keep them in the loop in the More project. I mean, we're not done with them. I mean, we'd like them to go on and get their general license and come back and be a teacher. So, the idea is that, when we have any in-person types of things, that they'll be invited to do GOTAs, that are in person. But right now, unfortunately, that's sort of our challenges.
And that also goes into the next question: how are you arranging to conduct testing and go to activities, especially with COVID?
Right, especially with COVID. And that's really the issue that we're trying to resolve right now. And I'll be able to answer that question maybe better in a couple of months. But we do have a group in North Jersey who has the use of a covered parking lot. It's like in one of those sort of office buildings where, lawyers are in there, and then they have this covered area where the cars are parked underneath, but there's no people working there on Saturdays or Sundays. And so they have the permission to actually go there and do these car exams. So people get to actually drive in there. They, assign them somebody who's going to watch them, make sure that they don't have any miscellaneous materials lying about. And so they're monitoring each person in their cars. So we may try that. That's another one that we may also conduct as well. I mean, it would be really great if we could get back into the Red Cross. We're trying to make connections with different museums. We have one out in the Silicon Valley area, and also the InfoAge Science Center here in New Jersey, that are willing to work with us and allow us to have exams and go to activities on site. So that's basically, we're trying to network to be able to do all of this.
Okay. And how many classes are you running currently, and how many do you expect to run?
Okay, so if you do the math, and we have about 15 students per class, and we graduate them all, then it's about 35 classes. So, you figure, okay, we started a little bit late with our classes because of all the things that we had to pivot on. And so we started our first class in November. So we say that a class takes approximately 2 months. At the end of that, they can test, and then we have to wait for them to get their licenses, and then we give them their radios before they can do their GOTA. So it's really like sort of a 2.5, 3 month span of time. So we are always starting up new classes. So we had class number 1, and class number 2 actually just started tonight. So I zoomed out of there and zoomed over here. And, so basically we are trying to start up a new class right now on every 4 weeks. And that was in the original plan. I knew that it was going to be a difficult rollout because we're debugging slide sets and figuring out better ways of explaining things and stuff like that. So basically we really probably will never be running a whole heck of a lot of classes at the same time. But if we get some of these groups, then a group could be sort of isolated by itself, and we would be able to run that efficiently. I don't know if we would ever run a class that's like in a week, like 5 Zoom sessions, and then the next week they take their test. I don't know if we would do that, but I'm imagining, so if we have to do this in 2 years, it's basically we're looking at running 35 classes. So eventually we will have to be ramping up to like almost every 2 weeks starting another class. But it's the input. We need to have more people coming in and applying, and that's what we're hoping, is that the word will spread, and it seems to be doing that actually, so that we'll be able to just start up classes. Right now we'll just be starting up a new one every month, so there'll always be two running, sort of 2 or 2.5, with waiting for their licenses and the GOTA. But basically, we'd hope to be able to do them more frequently. And then again, do maybe some as a compressed thing. So like if we wind up doing some school things or stuff like that. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's so fortunately ARDC, they said, if you run into trouble, let us know. We don't want to really, we don't want this to fail. So we're a little behind schedule, but considering COVID and all of this, I don't think, we're not that far off of where we intended to be by the end of this period of time. So I think we're in pretty good shape.
Will the training material be made publicly available, and if so, when?
Yes, they will. And that was one of the agreements with ARDC, was anything that we specifically developed for the MORE course, that it would be in the public domain. So again, because it's nonprofit, and that was part of our agreement with them. So so it will be on the website. Right now, we have just the students and trainers being able to look at the slides and to look at the Q&A sets, and they do get to download those, but we're not really ready to release those yet. We probably, I mean, it's really unfortunate because of the question pool changing. So even if we do release these, it's going to change in June. So we're leaving ourselves some time to debug them, and then when we release them, those will be made available. But then we're going to have to go through that same process again next summer. So yeah, they will be made available, just like all the other things that we have in the MORE project. It will be made available. So just keep checking back to the website. It'll be there.
When will the project end?
Theoretically, it's supposed to end during the summer of 2022 because of when we got our funding. Or it will end when we train 500, train and license 500 new technicians. So if we wind up, being able to run more classes, then it will end sooner. I would not have a problem with it ending sooner, but the thing is, we have to, really get it rolling so that we're really have an influx of students to be able to handle it. And and then also Rosie, as she had said, if you get stuck, let us know. So I'll be checking in with her this month. We have a meeting with them, and that's basically it. So that's basically when it will end. I guess another way that it will end is when we run out of money, but we budgeted it very carefully and are just sticking to the budget, so we should be in good shape. We're saving some money because the FCC still hasn't instituted the $35 license fee yet. I know that's been approved. I don't know that it's starting yet. So any of those, we budgeted that. So any of those that we don't have to pay for, that stays in the pool as well. So hopefully we'll make it to our 500 person goal. We'll see. So it may go longer than summer 2022.
And since this is an initial project, what plans do you have for more after this phase ends?
So, okay, once the project ends, as part of the project, I was an academic, and I know how to write academic papers and present them at conferences. And I definitely want to be writing some real papers about, what this was like, what it does, as a STEM education thing. I also plan to, I'll probably be writing a preliminary thing, for for QST magazine. I'd like to write an article for them, and then later write a more. Hold on for a second. I'm sorry about that. My phone is ringing.
Always.
Sorry about that. So so anyway, the the things that we'd like to do after the more project ends is basically writing up the findings and getting it published in some of the amateur radio magazines so that other people can replicate the course. And that's basically the idea, is that it's not supposed to stay with us, that other people should be able to create mores as well, and we're happy with that. I mean, we can train trainers. What we're doing now is that more can be replicated elsewhere. And if they stay within our guidelines of what we're doing, we will also provide the funding for the licensing, testing, and the radios, and extend, that to other groups. It just, they have to follow what we're doing. We hope it will evolve also, so people can take the more formula that we're creating and the materials and then sort of ramp it into something else, or do it for for the general license, or some of the other licenses. So anyway, that's the idea.
Okay. Are there any questions from the audience?
Questions.
Come on, people, let's have your questions. Raise your hand,
Typing them
answer
in.
them in the chat.
Let's see, what else do we have in the chat? Did I miss any in the chat?
No, I think we're pretty good in the chat.
I think we got them all pretty much. Okay, that's good.
I'm looking for people to raise.
Oh wait, someone was saying that someone was responding. Wow, I didn't know this part of the story. Was that Dan said that they were given the IP addresses. So yes, I didn't realize that. I thought they paid for them. So that was a nice gift. That worked out great.
Very early days of the internet.
Yes, it was the very, very early days of the internet. And Dan does owe me a reply to my email, so I'm expecting that.
During that period of time, I was able to get a Class B address. I could never even think of getting a Class B address nowadays.
Really? That's wild. That's really wild. Yeah, it is an amazing story, as Dan said. Yeah, I want to hear more about it. So yeah, Dan and I definitely have to talk. I admire what you folks have been doing. It's really amazing.
It's fascinating. One of the people that a lot of people have heard of, and imagine if he hadn't become a ham, is Steve Wozniak. He was a ham as a young teenager.
Yes, I think I remember hearing that. Yes, that Steve was a ham.
And he never would have joined the Homebrew Computer Club and meet Steve Jobs, and the whole computer industry would have been totally different. So
it's like the Beatles, they never would have gotten together. Yeah, it's really, yeah, you're right. It was really the Homebrew Computer Club and all of that. And out here on the in New Jersey, we have the Trenton Computer Festival, which has been running, the festival for so many years now. And, it's a similar type of thing where there's always been an amateur radio connection. When they used to have this humongous flea market, there was always plenty of ham gear and oscilloscopes and all sorts of stuff that you could buy.
The MIT market in Boston started out as the MIT Amateur Radio Club. And then they just expanded to computers, and it's now a gigantic. It fills a whole parking garage of stuff.
Yeah. They are. They always have that. Yeah, that's always fantastic too. I've been up there. That's been great. So there was a question here. It says, I have a scout interested in his license. He also got his radio merit badge. Yes, and the merit badge, well, that's another thing that we can do. The merit badge is a sort of conjunction of some of the material in the Moore course, which is in the licensing course. They learn about a third of it. I actually used to teach the merit badge training with some other radio operators here. And that gives the person a head start. They already know some of the things about antennas and propagation and stuff like that. But yes, you can, if you contact me through the Moore project, you can have the scout just sign up for his FRN or her, but I'm assuming He got, you said his, so his radio marriage. So have him get, go on the website, get the FRN, and then send me an email with the FRN. And we also, if the person is under between the age of 12 and 18, we also require a parent, but that'll come later. You just have the person send me their FRN, and then if you follow the instructions, it says that parental permission is needed for the people who are between 12 and 18.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience? Raise hands or anything. If not, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up, Rebecca?
Oh, well, I hope that everybody who watches this video and, is interested in trying to promote amateur radio. I would really urge you to just tell people about the project. We just need as many people as possible applying, and I think it's a fantastic thing. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your group, and hope that we'll stay in touch. I'll let you know how things are going. But basically, thank you very much, and get out there and get me more students, and that would be great.
Anthony's got his hand up.
Hi, Rebecca. Anthony
Hi,
Lusker,
Anthony.
KCT. We're interested in possibly becoming trainers involved in your program, if that's something that can be done, because we're doing something very similar, and I think we could benefit from working together on that process.
Absolutely, that would be fantastic.
Okay,
So again, on the website, it just says for people interested in becoming Vs or trainers,
yes,
just contact me. So you just send me an email explaining just what you said, and if you want to CC or other people who would be interested, and we could set you up as a more project training group. And so usually what we do is we have people sort of audit some of our sessions, so you see sort of the flavor of how it works, and get the idea of it, and we'll help coach you through. And then once you get started, you'll be official with us, and then as long as you conduct it sort of the way that we need it done, you'll be part of the project, and your students will benefit from all of the freebies. So it'll be great. I think it'll be fantastic. So
I'm the youth coordinator for the Ohio section. And
wow.
We've also been doing online classes for the last 2 years now, general and technician level classes. So
awesome.
We have a team that's been working on it, and working pretty well. So we'd like to maybe adopt some of the things you're doing into our process.
That would be fantastic. We can make all the materials available to your trainers, and then you would just be an official more project group. So that would be really great. Yeah, and if you can get information of the names of your trainers and stuff to me, names and email addresses. We do have a more team meeting coming up on the 7th.
Okay.
So the 7th of December, and you'd be welcome to attend that Zoom. That's just for people who would be doing that sort of stuff.
Then I also have I have a somewhat personal question for you. My mother's grandmother's maternal name is Mercuri.
Really? Spell with
Yes.
an I? With a
Well, they spell with an E, but I think it's been changed over time, because the other side of the family was spelled with an I and got switched. Also, the Lusker got switched from an
I
E at the end
understand
to
the
an I at the
family
end.
name was originally Mercurio, and
Yeah.
it was Italian, and so it
Yes.
had sort of, there are other Mercuries. If there are people in Massachusetts, those are related to actually my ex-husband's family. So Mercury is my adopted married name.
Yeah,
No
okay.
longer, but
Yeah, we
kept
do
it.
have relatives in Massachusetts, and also in Western Pennsylvania and Eastern
Oh wow!
Ohio.
Email me about that, because
Okay.
we may be connected with
Yes.
those Mercuries there. Many of them are musicians.
Rebecca,
So
can you type in the website and your email in the chat, please?
I will. Okay. And by the way, impressive collection of QSL cards behind you.
While she's doing that, I might comment that right after this, as we always do, we'll be including some documents that she has on her website that she sent me to include, as well as the chat and all the links is here. So everybody have a chance, when they do see the follow-up come out, you'll be able to get that material and how to contact her.
And thank you, everybody, for coming. This was an absolutely phenomenal presentation, and we need to promote more of this to keep the hobby and the service and whatever it is alive and going. We need a younger generation.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's really, you got to get people in, and I think, this is a great opportunity to be able to do that. So yeah, yeah, keep it going. Help me. That's great. Okay, I typed in the website and also my email address, so you should be able to get a hold of me. If you go to the website, you'll be able to find it. You can just go on Google and type in
I
More
see,
Radio Project.
your email.
So the email was right above that, rtmercuri@ieee.org.
Okay, I see it. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you all for coming.
yes,
Great,
thank
great. I
you.
hope to hear from many of you.
I think you will be hearing from folks, not only from this one, but from the follow-up, from the people who watch the video and follow these things along. So appreciate you coming on and doing this. Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, good night, everyone. As normal, I leave this, if you want to come back on and chat and visit and just whatever, just log back in like you did before. And Zoom will be waiting for you to come on, back on and enjoy yourselves. So 73s, everyone. It's been another great presentation, and see you next go around. Bye now.